So welcome back everyone to our second video in this Design Thinking Masterclass. And I have Rody Vonk with me again. He is a innovation, creativity, and design thinking specialist, trainer, speaker. And we're going to talk again or a bit more about design thinking and delve a little bit deeper into what it's all about and how you can use it in your organization or with your team. So just a little bit of a recap on the last video. We spoke about, we just gave an overview of design thinking and how it can be applied. And one of the biggest insights that I had gained from just chatting with you, Rody, was about speed. You know, design thinking isn't just about a process or even a mindset. It's also about having something that allows you to speed things up. And, it just means that your go-to-market strategy is much faster, or your launch strategy for, putting in a new service or a new system is that much faster. And tell us again how that actually works with design thinking and why that works so well with design thinking.
Since design thinking is like you said, it's a process, but it's also a mindset. And what I always tell people in trainings is that you don't have to be perfect right from day one, so to say. So if you're developing a new product or a new service, you don't have to be perfect once you go to market. Of course, you want to have refined it and you want to have thought it through well enough. But a lot of organizations tend to work on an idea, a new product or a service too long, and then only then to find out whether or not it works. Of course, I do some tests, etc. But design thinking is aimed at really speeding that process up to go to market much faster by going through, so to say, build, measure, learn loops. So you build something, you test it in practice, and you improve. And at one stage, okay, now it's good enough to go to market, and then we can still improve in practice, so to say.
Is it not also about the fact that by going through this process, you're less likely to make big mistakes or waste a lot of resources, time and money? Is that right too?
Yeah, that's what happens if you do the process like this, like design thinking, because you go through these build, measure, learn loops all over again. Then you don't spend too much time and too much money, just like I said, in each of those loops. So if you need to adjust, if you need to go in a different direction, or if you need to get rid of the whole idea based on tests, then you don't have thrown too much money and time away. And if you don't do this, if you take too long to go to your audience, to your target audience, the risk is that you have spent so much time and money already. You don't want to get rid of the idea. You don't want to. Let's put it different. You want to make sure that it's becoming a success because you already spent so much time and money. That's not the way to go.
No,
and it helps you to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's given us comments and feedback, and also some questions from the previous video. And what we'll be doing is we'll be answering some of those questions in the video, so make sure that you watch to the end. And before we continue, what I'd like to do is just introduce myself and Rody, so that you get to know us a little bit more. My name is Therese, and I'm the owner and founder of Freegency. We offer coached courses and digital expert coaching from experts from around the world. The best way that you can learn is through a coach. And why not learn about AI or design thinking or blockchain or, any of those new interesting topics that we need to know for the future? Why not learn directly from a coach, someone who's done it before, someone who understands it, and someone who's been able to apply it? And the reason why expert coaching works so well is that our coaches can show you how to implement everything, and also within the context of your specific organization and your role. And that's why coaching works so well. So one of our coaches is Rody Vonk. He is, as I mentioned, a creativity, design thinking, and innovation expert. and he is going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Therese. Yes, I'm Rody Vonk, as you said. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I have a background in graphic design, advertising, and started to move more and more into the direction of concept development and strategies. And from there, I started to do trainings on creative thinking. So creativity somehow has always been part of my job. But at one point in time, I thought, well, creativity is always thought of as being a skill of those creative people in advertising agencies or people in arts or whatever. And I thought, well, it's a skill that I think we can use more in daily life, in daily work life. So I started to do these sessions, and I found that a lot of people find it nice to do that and to have a little bit of fun, and then we go back to normal again afterwards. And I thought, no, that's not how I see it. So I tried to put it in a more serious framework, and by doing some research, I found out about design thinking, where creativity is one step of the process. So then it becomes a part of a sort of serious framework which you can use for business innovation. Or solving complex problems. So I've been to Africa, to Middle East, to Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So it gives you good insight as a trainer in differences between people, between cultures, but also, of course, learn a lot about a lot of different organizations around these topics.
And have you found that the organizations that you've trained have really shifted in terms of their approach to innovation?
Well, I've seen, so my primary aim is to at least get them to know the process and techniques, so the training part. So what I'm growing into more and more is doing more coaching. And what I've seen is that there is some sort of willingness to do things more efficiently, to do things more effectively, especially in the world we live in today, fast changing world, of course, because of technology and everything that's happening right now. So they're really keen on getting those tools and techniques to be able to speed up those processes that we just talked about a few minutes ago. And of course, as it always works with trainings, you don't do a training and the next day you can apply everything that you've learned. That's not the way it works. You have to do it step by step. So also design thinking, and we give them some techniques, some tips and tricks, which you can start using right after the training, but you can start very small, and that's key in implementing it. Someone once said to me, you can use design thinking to implement design thinking. So that's an interesting point of view, I think. And
yeah.
With that mindset as well, keeping it small, taking small steps, also by implementing a process like this, I think that is key. And it will take time before your whole organization, if that's your ambition, is thinking the same way. And it's change, it's cultural change. And we all know that's hard.
You made such a really good point that people have the willingness to change and the willingness to be innovative and to, do amazing things for their organization. But what's lacking is the how. And that's what we're going to discuss today. That's what we're doing with this masterclass is we want to show people how they can use design thinking to be more innovative, to go faster, and deliver, more innovative, amazing products, remarkable products and services to their customers, but also to internal employees. So let's get right to it, shall we? So, Rody, we gave an overview of design thinking in our last video, and you told us that you were going to share a really great tip or something, an actionable thing that individuals and teams can use right away, and that was how to define a problem statement. Because we spoke about design thinking as not just being about solutions. One of the first steps is to look at how to define the problem and really understand that problem before you even get to a solution. Because, solutions, there are so many possible options out there. But I think the real crux of the matter comes down to defining the real problem. And I think in the last video, you mentioned to me that, you can solve solutions or you can solve problems, but it may not be the right problem. So let's talk about that. How do you define that problem statement? And then also, how do you discover, what is the real problem? What's the real problem that you have to solve?
Yeah, I think this is exactly the the biggest advantage of design thinking that we come down to right now, since basically design thinking is primarily aimed at problem finding. Of course, you work towards a solution, but the main aim is problem finding. And the design thinking process is as we have discussed, it's a 5-step process. So the 5 steps in the process are empathize. So empathize with your target audience. Then you define a problem statement, which I will get back to in a second. After that, you start ideation, brainstorming ideas and solutions. Then you're going to build a prototype of the best idea. And that's the one you're going to test with your target audience. So that's basically the 5 steps of the design thinking process. And the first 2 steps, so empathizing with your target audience and defining the problem statement, are actually the 2 steps you want to put the most time in. Because if you do that, then research shows that you can speed up the process which comes after that. A lot of people and organizations tend to think they know what the problem is and start to come up with solutions right away. But you want to define that problem. So to come back to your question, how do you define that problem? By first diving really into your target audience, empathizing with the target audience. So one of the tools that you can use to empathize with your target audience is creating a stakeholder map. That's mostly step 1 in the process as I train it to people. And actually what you do, you create a sort of landscape of people and organizations who have something to do with the topic you're trying to solve. And why is it that you do that? Because you always find that there's more people or organizations involved in this topic that you might think of at first. And if you do that, you can say, okay, we now have an overview of all those people and organizations who have something to do with this topic, but who do we think is the most important for us to target? And what is their problem then around this topic? Because for every stakeholder, the problem might be slightly different. So just for example, if you are a company selling toys and you create educational toys, then the so to say problem you're solving maybe for the target parents is that you give them responsible toys which allows their children to learn while they play. But another target audience are children, because those are the ones you're going to use it. And for them, it's maybe just a fun toy to play with. So it's a slightly different perspective on the same issue, but who are you primarily aiming on with your problem statement? So that's something you want to find out. And this stakeholder map is helping you to choose that most important stakeholder you're aiming for. So once you've done that, then you can say, okay, if we target at the parents in this case, for example, let's create a persona. That's the second thing we do. So a persona is a description of a representative of your whole target audience. And then you describe that person like age and gender and location, income level, but also what are his or her skills or ambitions in life in general. So you try to get an insight in this person. And again, it's not one person you're describing, it's a representative of a whole group. And once you've done that, we create a customer journey. So we're gonna take a situation where this persona has something to do with this topic that you chose. And how does the journey look like when he or she is coming up to this topic? So if you talk about educational toys, for example, then you might say, okay, the journey starts with a wish to find something that helps your kid to be educated. And then you're going to shop online, or you go to physical stores, and then you're going into toy stores, and then you find educational toys maybe. So what does the journey look like when parents are buying these toys, for example? So just of course now very short example, but just to give you some idea that from stakeholder mapping, very wide, creating one persona, narrowing down a little bit already, and then creating a journey for that persona around the topic that you're trying to solve. This is a step-by-step process where you're narrowing down to come up to a real problem statement. And that's what you want to do in the first step of your process. So that's basically in very short, it's the empathize phase of the process.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the insights that I gained from that is that we very often, and as a marketer, I know that we very often focus just on the target audience, the one single target audience, and it's such a clever, piece of or an activity to do to actually look at who the full stakeholders are, because I'm sure for organizations that really want to excel, they would probably go back to that stakeholder map and look at key problem statements for each of those stakeholders that relate to that topic, and develop or make sure that their solution is actually answering all of those, or perhaps there's different solutions for each of those stakeholders.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's exactly what it is. You might want to take each stakeholder, or the most important ones, one by one, to go through the whole process, and then see what solutions you can come up with, for two reasons. Just like you said, you might need different solutions for different stakeholders. But also, when you've got a solution, you want to check with the stakeholders on your stakeholder map to see. So sometimes with a solution, you create a new problem for another stakeholder. So you don't want that to happen. But so it's just going back and forth every time to try and find which direction you want to go, and which problem statement is the best one, which stakeholder is the most important one to go for. And you can also create different personas. So you can also say, okay, we've got this group of stakeholders, or this stakeholder is what we're aiming for, who we're aiming for. Let's create around the stakeholder different personas. So I just gave you the example of the parent, but maybe you want to say, okay, the parents are interesting, but why don't we also take the schools? Because they might need educational choice as well. Let's create a persona for a person who is responsible for buying all the materials for a primary school, for example. What persona comes out of that, and what would the problem statement then be for that person? And then, so you can do that for multiple personas.
Okay, so like having a primary persona, and then also the secondary personas.
Yeah, because you might think that you know what the primary persona is, but you may find out later in the process that you may target another audience. So it's just a matter of trial and error. Try it out, see where you go, what the problem statement is for each persona. Take each of those problem statements into a ideation session, see what the solutions could be, and then see what would work best, of course, by testing it.
Thanks, Rody. That's a really great summary of the empathize stage of design thinking. And now I'd like you to chat about the define stage. So tell us a bit more about that, and how do you then take those insights from the empathize stage and create a problem statement? I mean, that still sounds like there's lots of information, but how do you actually boil it down into one single problem statement?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's that. It's you've got a lot of information. So as we said, you if you have created multiple personas, just pick the one you want to focus on first, and see what, based on the customer journey that I mentioned, what is the biggest pain point for this persona that you want to solve. So just to very quickly give you another example, which might make it more clear for our audience, is there's an example of the eye hospital in the Netherlands, and they found out that not all their surgeries were 100% successful due to the stress level of the patient. And they created a customer journey. What would the day of this patient look like when he has to go to the hospital for the surgery? Walking out the door, stepping into the car, driving through traffic, all the way to the hospital, park the car, go inside, etc., etc. What they found is that one of the moments that the patient has most stress is parking their car.
Wow.
So they solved that issue by introducing valet parking, which of course is an existing service in hotel industry. Yeah. And just by doing that, the amount of surgeries that were successful rose significantly. So by doing such a customer journey, you can find unexpected pain points, problems, for that specific persona, which you might overlook if you don't put time and effort in this. And then you might come up with a solution, in this case, which is already out there, very simple, but very effective. So that's why it's very good to put time and effort in this. So just a short bridge to the define stage, because then you found your biggest pain point. I already gave away the solution, but just one step back. So we find that parking is the biggest issue. And then you can frame your problem statement around that pain point. And a problem statement is, we have a sort of formula in design thinking, how to frame that. And that is basically called a how might we question. So how might we help user segment X to solve problem Y? Where user segment X is your persona, and problem Y is the problem that you found in your stakeholder map, the biggest pain point in the case of the eye hospital, the parking issue. So how might we help user segment X to solve problem Y? So can you give an example of a total different case? It was around students in India and give them a better education. And it was something like, how might we help students of age 12 to 15 who live in rural villages in South India to get a better education? Things that were put in that how might we question are things that you could have described in the persona. So it's around students with a certain age living in a certain location, in this case, rural villages in southern India. And why is it important? Because you can imagine that, especially in a country like India, if you live in a rural village and you have a low income, because that was also something that was in that specific question, low income families, then your solution might be totally different than when the students were living in a city, because you can reach them much easier in a big country like India, in a city, than maybe in a rural village. And if you target low income families, then your solution, of course, must be something that is affordable for this target audience. Otherwise, you have a great solution, but nobody's going to buy it. So all the information that you got from the stakeholder map, the persona, and the customer journey, you can sort of cherry pick and see what of that information you want to put in the how might we question. And again, here you can play around with. You can make multiple how might we questions and put each of those one by one into an ideation session and see what comes out of it, just to see which direction you think is most interesting. And one thing not to forget, and that's, I think, one of the key things in design thinking, and especially in the define stage, when you have written down this problem statement and you have found one you think is the best one, before you start ideation, do a problem interview with a few people from your target audience. And a problem interview, that's a whole technique in itself. It goes a little bit too deep in this session to dive into that. But just in short, there's a set of questions, a way of questioning in a problem interview. And the main thing here is you don't want to go to a person and say, do you recognize this problem? Because then you're framing them towards a certain direction. There's a way of questioning in which you can get the person to come up with that problem, him or herself. But if they don't come up with this problem themselves, then this probably isn't the real problem for them. So you want to find that out in the define stage, in the problem interview. And what will come out of those interviews is that you might find a few things that will help you to adjust or refine your problem statement. So you know it really resonates with the target audience. And the good thing is about these problem interviews, you only have to do like 5 or 10 of those to get an idea if you're in the right direction. So you don't have to do a whole market research with 100 people. So small steps, you can start very quickly with this as well. So that's basically around defining.
You know, the way that you've explained both of these two stages is that it's not, and what you've just mentioned now is it's not, you know, hardcore work. It's not work that takes a long time, and it's not work that involves multiple people and outside agencies and consultants and everything. This is work that you can do on your own, just engaging with customers, observing customers, you know, sitting in a room and thinking through certain steps with your colleagues, or, you know, with some customers, having telephone interviews. I mean, are these questions that you're saying that we can have? Can these be conducted over telephone, or do they have to be face to face?
It is a possibility, but your best bet is doing it in person, because it's not only what people say, but it's also how people say it, body language.
Mm.
So ideally, you do problem interviews one-on-one, face-to-face. So you can take note of those, so to say, hidden information that might be very valuable.
Okay, Rody, so we had a number of questions from our audience who watched the first video, and I thought maybe we could chat about those now. So the first question that was asked was, they said that they know the problem already and they've got an amazing solution, so why do they need design thinking?
Okay, so the first thing I would ask this person is, did you really dive into the problem, as we just discussed in the empathize and define stage of the process? Because I see a lot of times in trainings that people come up to me with similar remarks, similar situations. But when we have done the empathize and define phase in the training, then it's, now I see that, okay, actually, to be honest, we thought we knew what the problem was, but we didn't really speak ourselves, for example, with the target audience. We have data and research, and based on that, we have defined our problem and came up with a solution. But if you are the one working on a solution, you should also be the one talking to real customers, real users, or whatever it is your target audience is. So if you have not done that, I would say, even if you already got an answer, just put aside that answer for a few days, open up again, do 5 or 10 problem interviews, and see if you're on the right track before you take this solution that you already have thought of to the next stage of execution, maybe.
Okay, fantastic. And I think, one of the things that I've read recently is that 90% of products fail, new consumer products fail. And that's from a Harvard Business Review research that was done. And I think that's exactly, it speaks to the fact that they probably haven't done proper empathizing with customers. They haven't really defined the problem statement. And that just answers the question. If you haven't gone through these phases properly and you've come up with a solution, you've jumped straight to stage 3 of design thinking, then you're probably not going to get the end result that you're after, and your product or your solution might fail. So it's best to just do these steps properly. And I love the fact that you said, do it yourself. You are the one that is coming up with the solution. So you should be the one who's actually directly interacting with the customer as well.
It doesn't have to take a lot of time. So doing 5 to 10 interviews, if you have a day, then you can do 5 to 10 interviews. So that's it. But it can give it. I will assure the whole audience here, based on experience in trainings, teams always get at least 1 or 2 great insights from doing just a few interviews. 1 or 2 insights that are really key for their problem statement before they start ideating. So I would really strongly advise to at least do a few of those. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it will save you so much time later on in the process.
Okay, fantastic. So Rody, one of our audience members also asked about, design thinking, but on an organizational level. So how do they, because people are eager to start using design thinking as a process within their own role, within their own division. But how do they start using that process if their organization is not on board yet?
That's actually one of the hardest part in innovation in general, getting everybody on board, because basically that's what the question I think is all about. How do we get buy-in from the whole organization? And that comes down again to what I said a couple of minutes ago, is the key thing is to find a small team or a small project with low risk to start using the techniques from design thinking and try to come up with first successes as soon as possible. And it can be very small successes, but as soon as you can start sharing successes within your company, then people will get more positive. If you just, okay, let's do it totally different this time. Let's do design thinking. The first question you will get is, and what will be the return on investment, for example? You don't know yet because you're doing something different. You're doing something new. And that requires trial and error and experimenting. But if you do that in short loops and quickly and smart, and get to first successes by doing this, even if they're small, if you share those first successes, you get buy-in easily to at least take a second step and to scale things up a little bit more maybe. And so that's also a sort of loop you can go through by creating those successes, and after that scaling up over and over again. And when you have a first project done with good results by doing this, then you can show this result in a broader audience in your organization. So people are attracted to success more easily than to uncertainty, of course. So this is the way how you can do it. Start small in every step of the process, and in every step in implementing it in your organization. Always think of how can I make it as small as possible to at least do it. That's key.
That's actually a really great way to phrase it, is just start small. Start small, prove the concept, and then grow from there. And I think, in life, that's probably a concept or an insight that we can use across everything that we do. Start small and grow from there and build from there and then prove it. And then you can start scaling up. One of the last questions that we had, Rody, is that one of our audience members said, design thinking just seems so structured and their team likes to work in action. So how do we, how do they use design thinking if they like to just go with the flow and work and just do? How does design thinking fit into that kind of mindset, I suppose?
I really like that question. Because it's also something I hear sometimes, that if you're trying something new, then you want to be free in your head to go in any direction you want, to find those new ways of doing things or new solutions. So why do I need a structured process then? Having a step-by-step process, which allows a lot for change and going back and forth, being iterative, is really helpful to get your team, if you're working in a team, for example, to get your team through each step of the process. People like to have a paved path so that they know where they're going through. But this path is not paved from A to Z, it's paved from A to B. And when we get to B, then we see which direction we go next. So it's not that the whole process is structured in a way that you make a plan on day one, what you're going to do all the way towards the end of the year or towards the end of next year. You just plan for what is the first step. You have your tools that help you. Again, very small. And when you've done that, then you take a next step. If you find out in the next step that you need to change, that you need to go towards a different direction, you may need to go step back in the process and start again. So that's where the flexibility is in the process, but you have your tools that help you have a clear path, and that's really what is helpful. So in that sense, it's structured, but you have the freedom and the liberty to move back and forth.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rody, for answering those questions. I think you've done a great job in answering that. And, design thinking can work for teams who want to scale. It can work for people who, have a free way of thinking, but it's just adding a little bit of structure and tools and techniques that will actually help them. So we're going to wrap up this Design Thinking Masterclass, this second video. And what are you going to share with us in our next and our final video to teach and show people how to start implementing design thinking in their organization? What will you share with us?
In the next video, we will look at the three stages of the design thinking process. We looked at step 1 and 2 in this one. So we look at step 3, 4, and 5 in the next one. So in the next video, I will share one technique that really helps in the ideation session and the brainstorm session, because every good solution, every great idea starts with loads of ideas. So there's a great technique that helps you to come up with that many ideas. So instead of ending up after an hour of brainstorming with just 3 post-its on the wall, maybe, how can you come up with like hundreds of ideas and post-its on the wall, which will help you to come up with this one great solution? That's what we're going to share in the next video.
Ooh, that sounds very interesting. I'm going to be eager to hear that. Okay, thank you so much, Rody. Thank you for sharing all of this information with us. You've given us some really great actionable tips and insights that we can already use to start implementing design thinking into our organizations. And I really look forward to the next video and chatting with you again. And for the people watching this video, don't forget that wherever you see this video, go and comment, leave us a question if you want to ask Rody something, about design thinking, leave us a question, or you can email us at hello@regency.co, and we will answer those questions for you in the next video or via email, just whichever comes first. And yeah, I look forward to chatting with you again, Rody. Have an awesome day.
You too. Thanks for this video, and I hope our audience has loads of inspiration and ideas already to start using design thinking.